This story is titled, "My Brother Framed Me for a Crime I Didn't Commit, so I Made Sure He Paid the Ultimate Price." Even I was shocked by what happened next. Let me introduce myself. I'm Chris, 26M, and until 6 months ago, I was living what most people would consider a pretty successful life in Sacramento. I had a great job as a software developer at a promising startup, a comfortable apartment, and was even dating someone I thought might be the one, Rachel, 24F. But everything changed because of my older brother Marcus, 29M, who I'd always looked up to despite his complicated relationship with the truth. Growing up, Marcus was the golden child in our family, especially in our father Richard's, 58M, eyes. He could talk his way out of anything, and I mean anything. While I was the quiet, responsible one who played by the rules, Marcus lived by his own code. He had this incredible ability to make people believe whatever he wanted them to believe, and I'd watched him use this gift countless times throughout our childhood to get out of trouble. Our mother Sarah, 55F, always saw through his schemes, but her attempts to call him out usually ended with Dad defending Marcus, claiming she was being too hard on him. This dynamic created a rift in our parents' marriage that never quite healed, leading to their separation when I was 16. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs when Marcus started showing up at my apartment more frequently over the past year, always with some new business venture he was excited about. I'd been saving up for an engagement ring for Rachel, planning to propose on our upcoming trip to Lake Tahoe. The ring was hidden in my desk drawer at work, and everything seemed perfect. But I noticed something was off with Marcus during his last few visits. He seemed nervous, distracted, and kept asking oddly specific questions about my company's security systems and server room access. Being his brother, I brushed it off as just another one of his phases, thinking he was probably just interested in tech because of some new scheme he was cooking up. What I didn't know then was that Marcus had gotten himself into deep trouble with some very dangerous people over a gambling debt. He owed them nearly $200,000, and they weren't the type to accept payment plans or excuses. I also didn't know that my trusting nature and position at the company were about to become the solution to his problems, a solution that would cost me everything I'd worked so hard to build. The last normal day of my life was a Tuesday. I remember it clearly because Rachel had surprised me with lunch at work, bringing my favorite curry from that little place downtown. We sat in the break room, planning our Tahoe trip, completely unaware that in less than 24 hours, my world would implode in ways I never could have imagined. If I had known what Marcus was planning, I would have done things differently. But that's the thing about trust. It blinds you to the obvious until it's too late. That Wednesday morning started like any other. I arrived at work early, as usual, swiping my security badge and greeting our security guard, Mike, 42M, who'd been working there since the company's founding. I had no idea that this ordinary interaction would later become crucial evidence against me. As I settled into my workspace, I noticed several urgent emails from our IT security team about suspicious server activity overnight. Being one of the senior developers, I was asked to look into it. What I found made my blood run cold. Someone had accessed our secure servers between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., downloading massive amounts of client data and financial information. The breach was sophisticated, executed with insider knowledge of our systems. But here's the terrifying part. The access logs showed my credentials were used, and the security footage from that time period was mysteriously corrupted. My hands were shaking as I immediately reported this to my supervisor, Jennifer, 45F. She seemed concerned but understanding at first, especially given my spotless record with the company. However, things took a dark turn when the forensics team discovered that the stolen data had been transmitted to an offshore account, and nearly $2 million in company funds had vanished along with it. By noon, everything spiraled out of control. 2 FBI agents arrived at the office, and I was called into a conference room. The evidence against me was overwhelming. My credentials were used, my personal laptop, which I'd brought to work the previous day, showed traces of the hacking software, and most damning of all, a series of encrypted emails were found in my work account, discussing the plan with someone using an anonymous email service. I tried calling Marcus during my lunch break, desperately needing someone to talk to, but he wasn't answering. Rachel's calls went straight to voicemail too, which was unusual for her. In a panic, I called my mother, who seemed oddly hesitant when I explained what was happening. Her voice shook as she told me something that made everything click into place. She'd seen Marcus leaving my apartment building at 3 a.m. the previous night, carrying what looked like my laptop bag. The pieces started falling into place with horrifying clarity. Marcus had been asking about my work schedule for weeks, always wanting to know when I stayed late or came in early. He'd insisted on taking me out for drinks the previous evening, keeping me out later than usual. I remembered feeling unusually drowsy after just 2 beers, how Marcus had offered to drive me home, how he'd helped me to my apartment because I was too tired. He must have taken my work ID, my laptop, and my spare keys while I was unconscious. But the worst revelation came that afternoon. The FBI agents revealed that someone had purchased a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands using my credit card. The flight was scheduled for that evening, under Marcus's name. When they tracked down Rachel to question her, she was found at the airport with Marcus, carrying a bag containing over $50,000 in cash. My girlfriend of 2 years and my own brother had been planning this together for months. I sat in that conference room, my world crumbling around me, as the agents explained that Rachel had already confessed to her part in the scheme. She'd been feeding Marcus information about my work schedule and security protocols for weeks. The late-night surprise visits to my office, the casual questions about my work, it had all been reconnaissance. My own girlfriend had been gathering intelligence for my brother, helping him set me up to take the fall for his desperate plan to pay off his gambling debts. The next 48 hours were a blur of interrogations, legal meetings, and crushing realizations. My company's legal team, led by the sharp-eyed corporate lawyer Linda Hayes, 52F, had already prepared a civil lawsuit against me. The evidence kept stacking up. They'd found emails dating back 3 months showing detailed planning of the heist, all apparently sent from my accounts. Someone had meticulously crafted a trail that led directly to me, while carefully obscuring any connections to Marcus or Rachel. But it was my father's reaction that truly broke me. When I called him from the police station, his response was unexpected. He believed I was guilty. He received a series of text messages from Marcus claiming that I had tried to rope him into the scheme, but he refused, and was now fleeing because he feared I would try to frame him for it. My own father chose to believe Marcus's lies over my desperate pleas of innocence. 26 years of being the responsible son meant nothing in the face of Marcus's manipulation. Then came the news that changed everything. Detective Sarah Chin, 38F, who had been assigned to my case, pulled me aside to inform me that Marcus and Rachel never made it to the Cayman Islands. Their flight had been diverted due to a medical emergency, landing in Miami instead. But here's where things got interesting. Airport security cameras caught the meeting with a man identified as Tommy, the Shark, Rodriguez, 45M, a notorious figure connected to underground gambling rings in Sacramento. Everything suddenly made horrible sense. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me to save himself. He'd used me as a sacrificial lamb to pay off his gambling debts. The stolen $2 million wasn't just about greed. It was about survival. Detective Chen revealed something else. They'd found evidence that Rachel had been involved with Marcus for over a year. Those times she'd worked late or had girls' nights out. She'd been with my brother, plotting my downfall. My lawyer, James Morton, 63M, managed to get me released on bail, but my life was effectively over. My apartment had been searched, my accounts frozen, and my reputation destroyed. Local news stations ran stories about the trusted employee who had betrayed his company. Former friends crossed the street to avoid me. My mother was the only one who stood by me, but even she couldn't offer much help beyond her unwavering belief in my innocence. That's when I received an anonymous email that would change everything. Someone using the username whitehat_417 sent me security camera footage from a coffee shop near my office. The video showed Marcus meeting with Tommy Rodriguez 2 weeks before the heist, along with another familiar face that made my heart stop. Jennifer, my supervisor. The same Jennifer who had been so quick to turn over evidence against me to the FBI. The email contained one more crucial piece of information: account numbers for an offshore bank in the Caymans. The sender claimed these accounts would prove my innocence, but accessing them would require skills I didn't have and actions I never thought I'd consider. I sat in my mother's spare bedroom, staring at my laptop screen, realizing that playing by the rules had gotten me nowhere. If I wanted justice, I would have to step into the shadows where Marcus had always thrived. The old Chris, the rule-following, honest, trusting Chris, died that night. In his place rose someone else, someone willing to do whatever it took to clear his name and make sure Marcus, Rachel, and everyone else involved paid for what they'd done. I had nothing left to lose, but more importantly, I had something I'd never had before, the motivation to be as ruthless as my brother, and a plan that would make his betrayal look like child's play. The anonymous email led me down a rabbit hole I never expected to explore. After 3 sleepless nights of following digital breadcrumbs, I discovered that Whitehat_417 was actually Kevin, 31M, a former employee who'd been fired 6 months ago after a confrontation with Jennifer. He'd been quietly gathering evidence of corporate misconduct ever since, convinced that something shady was happening at higher levels of the company. Kevin and I met secretly at a rundown diner outside the city. He showed me something that made my blood boil. Jennifer had been embezzling money for years through a sophisticated scheme, and Marcus had discovered her secret. Instead of exposing her, my brother had blackmailed her into helping with his plan. The server breach wasn't just about stealing $2 million. It was a cover-up for years of corporate theft totaling over $15 million. I was just the perfect patsy, a trusted employee with high-level access and a convenient connection to Marcus. But Kevin's help came with a price. He wanted revenge on Jennifer too, and his plan was far more elaborate than simply exposing the truth. He introduced me to his sister Maya, 28F, a former ethical hacker who now worked as a cybersecurity consultant. Together, they had been building a case against Jennifer and several board members, but they needed someone on the inside, someone who still had active credentials in the company's system. Someone like me. I knew helping them would mean crossing lines I could never uncross. But when I learned that Rachel had withdrawn the entire balance of our joint savings account, money I'd been saving for her engagement ring, the day before the breach, something inside me hardened. She hadn't just betrayed my trust. She'd been planning to destroy me for months while pretending to love me. The next phase of our plan required perfect timing. Using Kevin's inside knowledge and Maya's technical skills, we set up a complex digital trail that would lead the FBI to Jennifer's hidden accounts. But we didn't just find evidence of her crimes. We discovered emails revealing that my father had known about Marcus's plan all along. He hadn't just chosen to believe Marcus over me. He'd actively helped him set me up, convinced that I would get a lighter sentence than Marcus would for his gambling debts. The betrayal felt complete. Every pillar I had built my life upon had crumbled. But as Maya and I worked late into the nights, tracing money trails and planting digital evidence, something unexpected happened. She didn't just teach me about hacking. She showed me how to think like Marcus, how to stay one step ahead. For the first time, I understood the rush my brother must have felt when manipulating people and systems to his advantage. Everything was going according to plan until Maya discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in Jennifer's private emails was evidence that Marcus and Rachel hadn't just fled with the money. They were planning something bigger. The $2 million was just a test run for a much larger heist, targeting not just our company but several others, with a potential payoff of over $50 million. And the date they had planned for this bigger job was just 3 days away. We were suddenly in a race against time. If Marcus pulled off this larger heist, the investigation into the original breach would be buried under the chaos, and any chance of proving my innocence would disappear. Worse still, Maya found messages suggesting that Tommy Rodriguez's gambling organization was just a front for something far more dangerous. By trying to save himself, Marcus had gotten involved with people who didn't leave loose ends alive. That's when I received a text from an unknown number, a picture of my mother's house with a simple message. "Back off, little brother." They knew what I was doing. And now, the stakes weren't just about clearing my name. They were about keeping everyone I cared about alive. After receiving the threat against my mother, I convinced her to stay with her sister Andrea, 57F, in Portland, but not before she revealed something that turned the whole case upside down. She'd found an old USB drive while cleaning Marcus's childhood bedroom at her house. The drive contained encrypted files dating back 5 years, and one folder name caught Maya's attention immediately. Rodriguez Family Trust. Maya spent 12 hours breaking the encryption, fueled by energy drinks and determination. What we found was staggering. Marcus hadn't randomly gotten involved with Tommy Rodriguez's gambling operation. He'd been working for them for years, using his charm and my father's business connections to help launder money through legitimate companies. The gambling debt was just a cover story, and I wasn't the first person they framed for their crimes. We discovered files detailing 3 other incidents where innocent employees had been set up to take the fall for corporate theft. One name made Maya drop her coffee mug. It was her former mentor, Alan Parker, 55M, who allegedly committed suicide 2 years ago after being accused of embezzling from his company. The parallels to my case were chilling. But the USB drive held an even darker secret. Among the files was a series of photos showing Jennifer meeting with my father and Tommy Rodriguez at a lake house in Tahoe, the same lake house where Rachel and I had planned to get engaged. The timestamp showed these meetings had been happening monthly for over a year. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about a carefully orchestrated criminal enterprise that had been operating right under everyone's noses. The biggest shock came when we found a folder containing detailed plans for the upcoming $50 million heist. The target wasn't just any company. It was the regional bank that handled most of Sacramento's tech industry transactions. Marcus and his crew weren't just planning to steal money. They were going to crash the entire local tech sector, potentially destroying thousands of jobs and livelihoods. The plan was brilliant in its complexity, using the chaos of multiple simultaneous breaches to hide their true target. Everything clicked into place. Jennifer's embezzlement, my father's business connections, Marcus's charm, Rachel's infiltration of my life. It had all been part of a years-long setup. They needed someone with my specific access and skills to be the fall guy for what they were about to do. The original $2 million theft was just a dress rehearsal, designed to establish my guilt, so that when the bigger heist happened, law enforcement would already have their suspect. Maya and I were running out of time. The bank heist was scheduled for Friday morning, and we had no hard evidence that would convince the FBI quickly enough. That's when Kevin came through with something unexpected. He'd managed to hack Rachel's personal cloud storage, and what he found there sent chills down my spine. Among her files were detailed recordings of meetings between Marcus and Tommy Rodriguez, including one where they discussed what would happen to me after the big heist. They weren't planning to let me take the fall and live. They were going to make me commit suicide in my cell, just like Maya's mentor. We had the evidence we needed, but delivering it to the FBI would take too long. The heist would be over before they could act. Maya suggested we could try to stop the heist ourselves by breaking into their systems, but doing so would mean committing actual cybercrime, crossing a line that we couldn't come back from. As I sat there contemplating our options, my phone buzzed with another text message. This one was from Rachel, and it contained just 3 words that made my decision for me. "Sorry, little brother." They weren't just going to destroy my life. They were mocking me while doing it. In that moment, sitting in Maya's cramped apartment surrounded by empty energy drink cans and glowing monitors, I made a choice that would either save everything or destroy what little I had left. With just 18 hours until the heist, Maya, Kevin, and I put our dangerous plan into motion. We weren't just going to stop the heist. We were going to turn their own scheme against them. Maya discovered that Jennifer had set up a backdoor in the company's systems for the upcoming bank breach. Instead of trying to close it, we modified it, creating our own trap within their trap. The plan was incredibly risky. We needed to let them think their heist was succeeding, while simultaneously gathering evidence and redirecting their stolen funds. Maya created a sophisticated system that would make it appear as though their transfers were working, while actually sending the money to a specialized FBI holding account. The trick was making sure they wouldn't realize what was happening until it was too late. Everything hinged on timing and a wild card I hadn't mentioned to Maya or Kevin. I had secretly contacted Tommy Rodriguez's biggest rival, Elena Vasquez, 41F, with evidence of how Rodriguez had been skimming money from their shared operations. Elena's organization had been looking for a way to take Rodriguez down for years, and my evidence was exactly what they needed. In exchange for the information, Elena promised to have her people watch over my mother in Portland. I knew dealing with another criminal organization was playing with fire, but I needed all the leverage I could get. As 0 hour approached, an unexpected ally emerged. Mike, the security guard who'd been implicated in the original breach, reached out through Kevin. Turns out he'd been gathering his own evidence about Jennifer's late-night activities, including security footage that had supposedly been corrupted. He hadn't come forward earlier because Jennifer had threatened his daughter's medical care. She'd pulled strings to get the girl, Amy, 12F, into an experimental treatment program and made it clear that one word from Mike would end that arrangement. The night before the heist, Maya intercepted a message that nearly derailed everything. Rachel wasn't just helping with the scheme. She was now Tommy Rodriguez's girlfriend. She'd been feeding him information about Marcus too, setting up my brother for a double-cross. The message detailed plans to eliminate Marcus once the money was secured, making him the final fall guy while Rachel and Rodriguez disappeared with the bulk of the funds. This changed everything. Marcus may have betrayed me, but he was still my brother, and learning that he too was being played stirred something complicated inside me. Maya argued that we should let their double-cross play out. It would only make our evidence stronger. But I made a different call, one that would either prove I was better than them or destroy any chance we had of pulling this off. I anonymously sent Marcus proof of Rachel's betrayal, knowing it would throw their carefully orchestrated plan into chaos. Maya thought I was crazy, risking everything on the chance that Marcus might have a shred of conscience left. But I remembered something our mother always said about Marcus. He didn't know how to handle being the one betrayed instead of the betrayer. Just as I'd hoped, Marcus went ballistic. He confronted Rachel at their secret meeting spot, a fact I knew thanks to the tracking software Maya had planted in Rachel's cloud account. Their argument spiraled out of control, drawing the attention of hotel security. By the time Rodriguez's men arrived to contain the situation, Rachel had already called the police in a panic, and Marcus had forwarded their entire operational plan to every email address he had, including several FBI contacts. The irony was almost poetic. My brother's final act of chaos had actually helped me. But as emergency vehicles began converging on the hotel, and Maya's monitors showed increasing activity from Rodriguez's organization, we realized this was far from over. Rodriguez's people would be desperate to contain the situation, and they knew where to find me. Even worse, my father had just texted me his first message in weeks. "We need to talk. Now!" I agreed to meet my father at our old family cabin by the lake, the same place where he used to take Marcus and me fishing when we were kids. Maya insisted on setting up surveillance, and Elena's people were watching the perimeter, a precaution that would soon prove life-saving. What I didn't expect was to find both my father and Jennifer waiting there, with Jennifer holding a gun that was far too steady in her hands. Their plan had evolved. With Marcus's meltdown threatening to expose everything, they needed a new scapegoat for both the original theft and the failed bank heist. My father, ever the pragmatist, had decided that my suicide would be the cleanest solution. The story would write itself. The guilt of my crimes had become too much to bear, and I'd decided to end it all at the family cabin, leaving behind a detailed confession. What they didn't know was that Maya had already transmitted everything from Marcus's USB drive to the FBI, along with the evidence we gathered about the larger conspiracy. More importantly, they didn't know about Mike's security footage, which was currently being played in Elena Vasquez's office for some very interested federal agents. As my father launched into a speech about family loyalty and necessary sacrifices, several things happened at once. Rachel, who had apparently followed Jennifer, burst in through the back door in a panic. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead and screaming about Marcus. Tommy Rodriguez and his men had caught up with him at the hotel, and things had gone very bad very fast. In the chaos that followed, Jennifer's gun shifted from me to Rachel, and I saw my father's expression change as he finally realized just how deep he'd gotten himself into this criminal world. The sound of approaching vehicles sent Jennifer into a panic. When she turned to look out the window, I tackled her, something I'd never thought I'd have to do to my former supervisor. The FBI raid that followed was a blur of shouting and flashlights. Elena's tip had helped them track Rodriguez's men to the cabin, and the timing couldn't have been better. As Agent Chen led Jennifer away in handcuffs, my father tried one last time to talk his way out of trouble, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Rachel was arrested too, though she barely seemed to notice, lost in her own world and mumbling about Marcus. We learned later that Rodriguez's men had caught up with my brother at the hotel. He survived, barely, and was now in protective custody, having agreed to testify against Rodriguez's entire organization in exchange for a reduced sentence. The aftermath was complicated. Maya's software had successfully traced and recovered most of the stolen money, which meant the tech companies and their employees' jobs were safe. Kevin was offered a job with the FBI's cybercrime division, and Maya and I had dinner last night, our third date this month. My name was cleared, but going back to my old life wasn't an option. Too much had changed. Instead, I've started my own cybersecurity consulting firm with Maya, using our experience to help protect other companies from the kind of breach that nearly destroyed my life. Mike's daughter Amy is doing well in her treatment program, now fully funded by a legitimate medical grant. Last week, I visited Marcus in the hospital. He's different now, quieter, more like the brother I remember from our earliest childhood memories. He apologized, though we both know words can't undo what he did. But watching him struggle to rebuild himself from nothing, I realized something important about revenge. Sometimes the best payback isn't about destroying your enemies, but about becoming something stronger than they ever thought you could be. My father and Jennifer are awaiting trial, along with several members of Rodriguez's organization. Rachel took a plea deal and will serve 5 years. Tommy Rodriguez himself managed to evade capture that night, but with his organization in shambles and Elena Vasquez's people hunting him, his days of power are over. Mother moved back to Sacramento last month. Over dinner recently, she reminded me of something she used to tell us as kids. The truth always comes out in the end. She was right, but she forgot to mention one thing. Sometimes you have to fight like hell to make it happen. I still have the engagement ring I'd bought for Rachel. Maya spotted it in my desk drawer last week and raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. I'm thinking of selling it and using the money to start a fund for victims of corporate fraud. After all, the best revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about making sure what happened to you can't happen to anyone else.